Imagine looking through a telescope and discovering that everything the world believes about the universe is wrong. Imagine realizing that the Earth is not the center of creation, but just another planet moving through space. Imagine a world where questioning the stars could cost you your life. A world where looking through a telescope could make you an enemy of the most powerful institution on Earth. This was the reality of Galileo Galilei, the man who dared to challenge the might of the Catholic Church and paid the price for the truth. But how did it all begin? In the early 1600s, Europe was at war with itself, not just with swords, but with ideas. Science and religion were locked in a battle for truth, and at the heart of it all was one man, Galileo Galilei, the Italian astronomer, physicist, and philosopher who changed how we see the cosmos forever. Galileo was born on February 15, 1564, in Pisa, Italy. His father, Vincenzo Galilei, was a musician and mathematician, which meant that young Galileo grew up surrounded by both art and science. He was expected to become a doctor, but destiny had other plans. As a child, Galileo was fascinated by how things moved. He would drop objects from heights just to measure how they fell. Years later, he would conduct one of his most famous experiments, dropping two spheres of different weights from the Leaning Tower of Pisa to prove that all objects fall at the same rate, regardless of their mass. In 1609, Galileo heard about a strange new device invented in the Netherlands, the telescope. But while others saw it as a simple toy, Galileo saw its potential. Within months, he had built his own improved version, capable of magnifying objects 20 times their original size. Then, he pointed it at the night sky, and what he saw changed human history forever. He pointed his telescope at the moon and saw craters and mountains, proving that celestial bodies were not perfect spheres. He discovered 4 moons orbiting Jupiter, proving that not everything revolved around the Earth. He observed the phases of Venus, which directly contradicted the geocentric model. In the late 16th century, almost everyone believed that the Earth was the center of the universe. This idea, called the geocentric model, had been supported by the Catholic Church for centuries. This belief was based on the teachings of Aristotle, who claimed that all celestial bodies revolved around the Earth, and Ptolemy, whose complex mathematical models reinforced the idea of an Earth-centered universe. For over 1,400 years, the Church declared this as absolute truth, and questioning it was dangerous. Discoveries of Galileo provided undeniable proof that the heliocentric model, the idea that Earth revolves around the Sun, first proposed by Copernicus, was true. But Galileo's discoveries didn't just challenge science. They challenged the authority of the Catholic Church itself. In 1610, Galileo published Sidereus Nuncius, the Starry Messenger, detailing his groundbreaking observations. At this time, the Catholic Church held absolute control over knowledge. The Bible stated that the Earth was at the center of the universe, and to contradict this was heresy. Galileo's findings directly challenged religious doctrine, and the Church saw him as a dangerous threat. In 1616, the Church officially banned Copernicus' heliocentric theory, declaring it foolish, absurd, and heretical. Galileo was warned to stop promoting it or face the consequences. But Galileo was not a man who could be silenced. Galileo had seen too much to turn back. He knew the truth, but in a world where science was dictated by faith, the cost of speaking out was high. The question was, would he risk everything to prove what he knew was right? And what would happen when the most powerful institution in the world turned against him? After the Church banned Copernican theory in 1616, Galileo was officially warned, do not teach, write, or discuss the idea that Earth moves around the Sun. He knew that if he disobeyed, he could be arrested, or worse, executed like Giordano Bruno, a fellow scientist burned alive in 1600 for similar beliefs. For a time, Galileo played it safe. He focused on other studies, experiments with motion, mathematics, and even engineering inventions, like an early thermometer. But he was biding his time, waiting for an opportunity to push his ideas forward. That opportunity came in 1623. In 1623, a new pope was elected. Unlike his predecessors, Urban VIII was a highly educated man and had even been a fan of Galileo's earlier work. Galileo saw this as a sign. Maybe the time had come to convince the Church that science and religion could coexist. With renewed confidence, Galileo began writing his most important book, Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems, a masterpiece that would set the stage for his greatest confrontation. In 1632, Galileo published his revolutionary book. It was written as a conversation between three characters. Simplicio, a fool who argued for the Church's outdated geocentric model; Salviati, a brilliant scientist who defended Copernican theory; and Sagredo, a neutral observer caught in the debate. Though Galileo never directly attacked the Church, the message was clear. Science supported heliocentrism, and the old ways were wrong. The book was an instant sensation across Europe. It sparked public debate, and for the first time, ordinary people questioned whether the Church was wrong about the cosmos. But there was one problem. The character of Simplicio, the fool who defended the Earth-centered model, was widely believed to represent Pope Urban himself. The Pope, once an ally, felt insulted. What followed was swift and ruthless. Within a year, Galileo's book was banned. Copies were seized and burned. Then came the moment Galileo had feared for decades. He was summoned to stand trial before the Roman Inquisition. In 1633, 69 years old, Galileo was forced to make the dangerous journey to Rome. He knew what had happened to Giordano Bruno. He knew what happened to anyone who defied the Church. On April 12, 1633, Galileo Galilei stood before the Roman Inquisition in the grand halls of the Vatican. He was charged with heresy, the same crime that led Giordano Bruno to be burned alive just decades earlier. The court was filled with cardinals, judges, and priests. Outside, Rome bustled with life. But inside this dark chamber, history was about to be written in blood and silence. The question was simple. Will Galileo stand by his discoveries and risk everything? Or will fear force him to betray the very truth he fought for? The trial was brutal. He was questioned for weeks, forced to defend his discoveries against men who refused to look through his telescope. His arguments, based on mathematics and observations, were dismissed. Instead, they demanded him to prove that heliocentrism was not true, a task impossible for any scientist of that time. Galileo's book, Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems, was used against him as proof that he had directly defied the Church's decree from 1660. Even worse, many of his former allies had abandoned him. Scientists who once praised his work now stayed silent. The Pope, once his admirer, had turned against him. Under immense pressure, Galileo made his fateful decision. Seeing no way out, he chose to survive. On June 22, 1633, in a solemn ceremony inside a grand hall, Galileo was forced to kneel before the tribunal. With his hand on the Bible, he swore, "I abjure, curse, and detest the errors and heresies of Copernicus." He read aloud his confession, renouncing heliocentrism, swearing that he would never again claim the earth moves. The sentence was harsh: house arrest for the rest of his life. His book was banned, and his name was shamed. But legend has it, as he rose from his knees after his confession, Galileo whispered, "I pur si muove," and yet it moves. Galileo was sentenced to house arrest for the rest of his life. He spent his final 9 years isolated in his villa in Arcitri, near Florence. His name was erased from many records. But even in exile, Galileo never stopped thinking. In 1638, he secretly wrote his final masterpiece, Two New Sciences, laying the foundation for modern physics. Smuggled out of Italy, the book reached the scientific community and influenced minds like Isaac Newton. It took the Catholic Church more than 350 years to formally admit that Galileo was right. In 1992, Pope John Paul II issued a statement acknowledging Galileo's contributions to science and expressed regret for how he was treated. On January 8, 1642, Galileo Galilei took his final breath. He died a prisoner of the Church, but his ideas would live on, shaping the world forever. Today, Galileo is remembered as one of the greatest scientific minds in history, a man who dared to challenge authority in the pursuit of truth.